I woke up in intensive care, having lost a kidney, surrounded by empty chairs for visitors, and discovered that my father and brother had used the money meant for my recovery from surgery to gamble in Las Vegas. They told other relatives I was recovering perfectly in a private room, leaving me alone with a burning 7-inch incision on my stomach. They were completely unaware that my best friend had requested to see the hospital security logs and my uncle's bank transfer receipts to prove their betrayal. The first thing you register after a major organ extraction is not relief. It is a crushing, suffocating weight. Every time I tried to draw a breath, a sharp, tearing sensation ripped through my left side. My throat felt like cracked glass from the breathing tube, and the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the sterile, dimly lit room. I slowly turned my head toward the small sitting area in the corner of my ICU bay. I expected to see my father, Richard, dozing in the plastic chair. I expected to see my older brother, Marcus, checking his emails on his phone. The chairs were perfectly empty. The sterile wrappers on the hospitality tray hadn't been touched. I closed my eyes, assuming they had gone to the cafeteria. I had just given up a piece of my own body to save Uncle Arthur, my father's older brother. Arthur was the man who had actually raised me, who had funded my small bakery when my father told me I was wasting my life, and who was now recovering in another wing of this very hospital. I had assumed that such a massive physical sacrifice would finally earn me a permanent place of respect in my father's eyes. 20 minutes later, the heavy glass door slid open. It wasn't my family. It was Elena, my best friend and the manager of my bakery. She was carrying a small duffel bag and a look of absolute, barely contained fury. "Where are they?" I whispered, my voice barely producing any sound. Elena walked to the side of my bed, gently brushing my hair back from my forehead. She looked at the monitors, then looked down at me with an expression that made my stomach drop. "Harper, you need to stay calm, okay? Your blood pressure is already elevated." "Elena, where are my father and Marcus?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out my phone. 3 hours ago, Marcus posted a photo on his Instagram. He restricted you from seeing it, but he forgot to restrict my sister's account. She held the screen up for me to see. It was a picture of Marcus and my father standing in front of a high-roller blackjack table at a luxury casino in Las Vegas. They were holding expensive scotch glasses, smiling brightly. The caption read, "Celebrating a successful week of family health and new beginnings. #Vegas, #loyalty." I stared at the screen. My brain, heavily clouded by painkillers, struggled to process the geometry of the situation. Vegas? How did they afford that? Marcus just complained about his law firm cutting bonuses. Elena's jaw tightened. Before the surgery, Uncle Arthur transferred $40,000 into a joint family care account. He explicitly designated it for your bakery's rent, your apartment bills, and your private nursing care for the next 2 months, so you wouldn't have to worry about a single thing while you recovered. A cold, creeping numbness started in my chest, completely overpowering the burning pain of my incision. Because my father was technically my next of kin, Arthur had entrusted him with the administrative access to that account while I was under anesthesia. "I checked the online banking alert from your linked email," Elena continued, her voice trembling with anger. "Yesterday afternoon, while you were literally on the operating table having your kidney removed, Richard authorized a wire transfer of $32,000 to Marcus's personal checking account. They used your recovery money to fund a VIP gambling trip." I looked at the empty chairs again. The silence in the room suddenly felt incredibly violent. For 30 years, I had been the family's designated disappointment. I was the girl who baked cakes, while Marcus was the golden child who went to law school. I had spent my entire life trying to prove my worth, culminating in lying on a surgical table to slice myself open for the family. And the very second I was unconscious, the second I was no longer useful to them, they had robbed me and abandoned me. I didn't cry. The physical pain was too intense for tears, but the emotional clarity I felt in that exact moment was absolute. "Elena," I whispered, every word a deliberate effort. Do not call them. Do not ask where they are. Harper, they left you here alone. I have to say something. No, I replied, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. Go to the nurses' station. Request the official visitor logs for this floor from the moment I was admitted. Then, call the bank's fraud department and freeze the remaining balance. They think I am too weak to notice. Let them keep thinking that. I closed my eyes and let the steady beep of the heart monitor guide my breathing. My father and brother had just committed wire fraud against a trust fund, and they had done it while the victim was bleeding in intensive care. Marcus had built his entire legal career on a reputation of pristine ethics. He had no idea that his little sister was about to permanently destroy it. Recovery from an organ donation is a brutal, humbling process. Your body does not understand that you performed an act of kindness. It only knows that it has been violently invaded and robbed of a vital piece. Every time I coughed, it felt like the surgical staples across my abdomen were tearing open. Standing up required 10 minutes of intense psychological preparation, leaning heavily on Elena's shoulder just to shuffle to the bathroom. Through all of it, my phone remained completely silent regarding direct calls from my father or brother. But the family group chat, ironically named Family First, was incredibly active. On the morning of my second day post-op, Marcus sent a long paragraph to the group, which included our extended aunts and cousins. Just wanted to update everyone. Harper is doing amazing. The doctor said she needs absolute silence and isolation to avoid infection. So Dad and I made the incredibly hard decision to step away and give her the private space she demanded. We are sending her so much love from afar while she rests in her VIP suite. My Aunt Brenda replied immediately, "Such good men. She's always been so particular and bratty about having her own space. Make sure you two take care of yourselves. Caregiver burnout is real." I stared at the glowing screen. I wasn't in a VIP suite. I was in a standard, double-occupancy recovery room, listening to the woman next to me moan in pain. My father and brother hadn't stepped away to give me space. They had boarded a first-class flight to Nevada. Marcus, a licensed attorney, was systematically constructing a false narrative to ensure no relatives would visit the hospital and discover my empty visitor chairs. I didn't argue in the chat. I didn't defend myself to Aunt Brenda. I just took screenshots. Every lie was another nail in their meticulously crafted coffin. On day 3, the nurses finally allowed me to leave the surgical floor in a wheelchair. Elena carefully helped me into the seat, wrapping a warm blanket over my lap to hide the surgical drains. We didn't go outside for fresh air. We went directly to the transplant recovery wing on the 4th floor. Uncle Arthur was sitting up in his bed. He looked pale and fragile, but the chronic grayish tint that had shadowed his skin for the past 2 years was gone. My kidney was working. He was going to live. When Elena wheeled me into his room, Arthur's sharp, intelligent eyes immediately scanned the space behind me. He looked at the hallway, then back at Elena. "Where is Richard?" Arthur asked, his voice rough but steady. "Where is Marcus?" I didn't offer a polite excuse. I reached into the pocket of my robe and handed him the printed hospital security log, followed by the bank wire transfer receipt Elena had secured from the fraud department. Arthur put on his reading glasses. The room was completely silent as he studied the papers. I watched his expression closely. I expected shock. I expected denial. Instead, a deep, sorrowful anger settled over his features. He lowered the papers and looked at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I knew your father was a greedy man, Harper," Arthur whispered, his hands trembling slightly against the blanket. "I have known that since we were boys. But I never, in my darkest nightmares, imagined he would steal from his own daughter while she was bleeding in a hospital bed to save my life." "They went to Vegas," I said, my voice empty of any emotion. "Marcus is telling the family I demanded isolation." Arthur closed his eyes, taking a slow, measured breath. When he opened them again, the frail, recovering patient was gone. In his place was the ruthless, self-made businessman who had built a real estate empire from nothing. "Harper, "I did not put $40,000 into that account just for your medical bills," Arthur said quietly. "My total estate is worth over $4 million. My doctors told me I might not survive this transplant. That money was a test. I gave your father administrative access to see if he could finally be trusted to act as the executor of my estate, or if I should leave everything directly to you." A cold shock washed over me. My father and brother hadn't just stolen my recovery fund. In their short-sighted, arrogant greed, they had blindly walked into a multi-million-dollar trap. "Marcus is a corporate lawyer," Arthur continued, his tone turning dangerously sharp. "He knows exactly what unauthorized wire fraud is. He knows the legal penalties for misappropriating designated medical trusts." Arthur reached over and pressed the call button for his nurse. "Let them enjoy their champagne and their blackjack tables," my uncle said, looking directly into my eyes. "When they get back to Atlanta, I am hosting a little family celebration for my successful recovery, and we are going to serve them exactly what they ordered." I nodded slowly. The tearing pain in my side suddenly felt a lot less significant. The men who had treated my sacrifice as an inconvenience were about to learn that abandoning me was the most expensive mistake of their lives. 3 weeks later, my surgical staples were removed, and the sharp, tearing agony in my side had faded into a dull, manageable ache. Uncle Arthur was discharged 2 days after me, his new kidney functioning perfectly. To the outside world, our family had achieved a medical miracle. To capitalize on that narrative, my father and brother organized a lavish, welcome-home dinner party at my father's house. They invited our extended family, family friends, and even 2 senior partners from Marcus's law firm. They wanted an audience. They wanted to play the role of the devoted, loving patriarchs who had guided our family through a crisis. I wore a high-waisted dress that hid my bandages and walked into the dining room with a perfectly straight spine. Elena walked closely beside me, carrying a sleek leather portfolio. The house was filled with laughter, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the smell of expensive catering. Marcus was working the room in a tailored suit, looking incredibly tanned from the Nevada sun. When he saw me, he smiled warmly, a flawless, practiced performance, and wrapped a gentle arm around my shoulders. "There she is," Marcus announced loudly, ensuring the senior partners from his firm were listening. "The hero of the family. You have no idea how hard it was for Dad and me, pacing those hospital hallways, waiting to hear if our 2 favorite people were going to be okay." Aunt Brenda dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "You boys are so dedicated. I know she demanded isolation, but your spiritual support meant everything." I gently stepped out from under Marcus's arm. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just looked at him with an absolute, chilling calmness. "You didn't pace any hospital hallways, Marcus," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but the icy tone cut through the ambient noise of the room instantly. Conversations stopped. People turned to look at us. Marcus let out a nervous, patronizing chuckle. "Harper, you're still recovering. The medication makes you a little confused." "I am perfectly lucid," I replied. I held my hand out to Elena. She unzipped the portfolio and handed me a stack of crisp, color-printed papers. "I was not in isolation," I said, raising my voice just enough to address the entire room. "I was lying alone in the ICU with a severed abdominal wall. Meanwhile, you and Dad used the administrative access Uncle Arthur granted you to wire $32,000 out of my surgical recovery fund. You used it to pay for a VIP suite at the Bellagio, luxury dining, and high-roller blackjack tables." I handed the top paper directly to Aunt Brenda. It was the bank wire receipt, clearly showing Richard's authorization and Marcus's receiving account. My father's face drained of all color. "Harper, what are you doing? This is a family matter. We can explain everything in private." "You lost the right to privacy when you abandoned me," I stated. "That money was a gift," Marcus snapped, his lawyer facade cracking under the sudden, intense scrutiny of his firm's senior partners. Uncle Arthur gave Dad control of the account. We were going to pay the medical bills later. You are twisting this to make us look bad because you've always been jealous of my success." From the doorway of the living room, a deep, commanding voice silenced the entire space. "I did not give you that money as a gift, Richard." Uncle Arthur walked slowly into the room, leaning on a cane, his posture radiating absolute authority. The crowd parted for him. He stopped directly in front of my father. "I gave you administrative access to a designated medical care fund because I wanted to see if you possessed a single ounce of integrity," Arthur said, his voice dripping with disgust. "I wanted to know if I could trust my own brother to execute my estate when I pass. You failed." Arthur turned to face the room. "Yesterday morning, I had my legal team restructure my entire estate. The $4 million I had planned to leave to this family has been placed into an irrevocable trust. Richard has been entirely removed from the will. Marcus has been removed. Harper is now my sole beneficiary." The silence in the room was deafening. My father looked like he had been struck by lightning. He had just lost a multi-million-dollar inheritance over a Vegas vacation. Marcus's eyes darted wildly around the room. He realized the senior partners from his firm were staring at him in absolute horror. "You can't do this," Marcus hissed at Arthur. "I am family." "You are a thief," I corrected him. I pulled the final document from Elena's portfolio and handed it to my brother. "This is a completed, unfiled complaint to the State Bar Association regarding the unauthorized wire fraud of a designated medical trust. Attached are the hospital security logs proving your physical absence, the bank transfers, and the time-stamped photos you posted online." Marcus looked at the complaint. His hands started to shake. The arrogance vanished, replaced by the sheer, unadulterated terror of a man watching his entire prestigious career evaporate. "If you ever contact me again," I said, looking him dead in the eyes, "I will file it. You will be disbarred for fraud. If you or Dad ever try to dispute Arthur's will, I will file it. If you ever speak my name in this family again, I will file it. You have until Monday to wire the $32,000 back into the medical account." I didn't wait for his response. I didn't need to. The total humiliation in his eyes was the only answer that mattered. I turned around, linked my arm through Elena's, and walked out the front door. I didn't look back at the house, or the father who had always viewed me as a disappointment, or the brother who had treated my life as an inconvenience. 6 months later, my bakery opened a second location. My health fully returned. Uncle Arthur visits me every Sunday, sitting in the corner booth, drinking coffee and watching the line of customers stretch out the door. My father and brother were ostracized by our extended family. Marcus was passed over for a partnership at his firm after rumors of the trust fund incident quietly circulated through the office. They live in the same house, trapped in the bitter reality of the inheritance they threw away. Sometimes, people will demand that you set yourself on fire just to keep them warm. They will call it family loyalty. They will call it love. But real love does not abandon you in a hospital bed. It doesn't rob you while you are bleeding. I used to believe that I had to prove my worth by carrying everyone else's burdens. I was wrong. The moment I stopped carrying them, I finally realized how light, how powerful, and how valuable I had always been.